Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that a frozen island near the Arctic Circle could decide the future of American power, global trade, and even your national security. It sounds dramatic, but this is not fiction. This is Greenland. A place most people think of as empty ice, yet quietly becoming one of the most valuable pieces of land on Earth. And here's the real question that almost no one is asking openly. What happens if the United States loses its grip on Greenland? Because the truth is, the US can't afford that outcome. Not politically, not economically, and definitely not strategically. Right now, global power is shifting. Old rules are breaking, new rivalries are forming, and geography is becoming destiny once again. In this video on Finance Historian Time, we're going to uncover why Greenland matters far more than most people realize, how it fits into America's long-term strategy, and why losing influence there could weaken the US in ways that would be hard to reverse. This story is about money, military power, rare resources, climate change, and a new Cold War that's already unfolding in the Arctic. Before we go deeper, if you enjoy deep dive videos on financial history, geopolitics, and the hidden forces shaping the global economy, make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps Finance Historian Time grow. And it ensures you don't miss future stories like this one that mainstream media often ignores. Now let's start with something basic but crucial. Greenland looks distant on most maps, but geographically, it's closer to the United States than it is to Europe. In fact, Greenland sits right between North America and Europe, acting like a massive natural bridge across the North Atlantic. For centuries, powerful nations understood one simple rule: control key geography. And you control influence. Greenland is one of those places. During World War II, the US realized this quickly. When Nazi Germany occupied Denmark, America moved fast to protect Greenland, not out of charity, but out of necessity. Losing Greenland back then would have meant opening a dangerous gateway into North America. That same logic applies today, but the stakes are even higher. Greenland hosts Thule Air Base, now known as Patuxent Space Base, one of the most critical U.S. military installations in the world. This base is not just a military outpost. It's a core part of America's missile defense system and early warning radar network. If a missile were launched toward the United States from Russia, this base would likely be one of the first places to detect it. Losing access, influence, or stability around this base would create a massive blind spot in U.S. defense. That alone makes Greenland non-negotiable from a national security perspective. But military power is only one part of the story. The real shift is happening beneath the ice. Greenland is sitting on enormous reserves of rare earth minerals, uranium, zinc, and other critical resources that modern economies desperately need: smartphones, electric vehicles, wind turbines, advanced weapons systems. All of them depend on these materials right now. China dominates the global supply chain for rare earths. This gives Beijing massive leverage over the world, including the United States. Greenland represents one of the few realistic chances for the West to reduce that dependence. If the US loses influence in Greenland, and another power steps into control or heavily invests in these resources, America's economic vulnerability increases overnight. And then there's climate change. As Arctic ice melts, new shipping routes are opening, routes that can cut travel time between Asia, Europe, and North America by weeks. Greenland sits right next to these emerging sea lanes. Whoever influences Greenland gains a strategic advantage over future global trade. This is not a distant scenario. Shipping companies, governments, and militaries are already planning for this new Arctic reality. The Arctic is no longer a frozen backwater. It's becoming the next major theater of global competition. This is where things get uncomfortable. For Washington, the United States does not actually own Greenland. Greenland is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. It has its own government, its own political priorities, and a growing desire for greater independence. The US can't simply dictate terms. It must persuade, invest, and maintain trust. That's harder than it sounds. Greenland's population is small, but its strategic value is enormous. That imbalance creates opportunity for rivals who are patient, subtle, and willing to spend money. China understands this very well. Over the last decade, China has shown interest in Greenlandic airports, mining projects, and infrastructure investments. Officially, these are commercial deals, and officially, they are part of a long-term strategy to gain influence in key regions. Russia, too, sees the Arctic as central to its future power, with its massive Arctic coastline and military buildup in the region. Moscow does not want an uncontested U.S. presence near its northern flank. Greenland, once again, sits right in the middle of these competing ambitions. So when people laughed at the idea of the U.S. wanting to buy Greenland a few years ago, they missed the bigger picture. That moment wasn't about real estate. It was about signaling how critical Greenland has become in global strategy. It revealed a deeper anxiety in Washington, the fear of losing influence in a place that could define the balance of power in the 21st century. And near the end of this video, I'll ask you a question that I want you to answer in the comments because your perspective matters in this debate. For now, stay with me, because this story is only getting more intense from here. To truly understand why Greenland is so important today, we need to step back in time, because Greenland was never just an isolated land of ice. Its history is deeply connected to power, survival, and global strategy. For centuries, Greenland existed on the edge of empires. Vikings reached it first. Then European powers slowly realized its strategic position. Eventually, Greenland became part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but even then, it was never treated like an ordinary territory. It was remote, difficult to control, and expensive to maintain. Yet Denmark held on, not because Greenland was profitable, but because giving it up would mean losing something far bigger than land. Everything changed during World War II. When Nazi Germany occupied Denmark, Greenland was suddenly left exposed. The United States stepped in almost immediately. American forces moved to protect Greenland, building airstrips and weather stations. This wasn't about helping Denmark alone, it was about protecting North America. For the first time, the US realized that Greenland was a shield. Whoever controlled Greenland could monitor the skies, the seas, and any threat moving between Europe and America. That lesson never disappeared from US military thinking. After the war, Denmark regained formal control of Greenland, but the US never really left. Instead, it negotiated long-term defense agreements. This created a unique situation. Greenland remained politically tied to Denmark, but strategically tied to the United States. Over time, Greenland gained more autonomy. In 1979, it received home rule. In 2009, it gained self-government, including control over most internal affairs and natural resources. This was a turning point. Greenland was no longer just a passive territory. It was becoming a political actor with choices to make. And those choices matter more than ever today. Greenland's population is small, around 56,000 people, but its land is massive and resource-rich. Running Greenland is expensive. Denmark still provides billions of dollars in subsidies every year to keep the economy stable. This creates a difficult reality for Greenlandic leaders. They want more independence, more control, and more economic freedom. But independence requires money, a lot of it, and this is where global powers see opportunity from Greenland's perspective. Foreign investment looks like a path to independence. Mining projects, infrastructure development, airports, ports, jobs. These are not abstract ideas. They are real needs for a society trying to stand on its own. But from the US perspective, foreign investment is not neutral. When rival powers invest, they don't just bring money. They bring influence, leverage, and long-term strategic presence. This creates a quiet but dangerous tension. Greenland wants options. The US wants control, or at least predictability. Denmark wants stability. And rival powers are watching patiently, ready to step in where gaps appear. The more Greenland talks about independence, the more important it becomes for the United States to stay deeply involved. Not aggressively, not publicly, but consistently, because once influence is lost, it's extremely difficult to regain. This is why the idea of the US losing Greenland doesn't necessarily mean losing it overnight. It could happen slowly, through deals, through investments, through political shifts, through decisions that seem small at the time but add up over years. History shows that great powers rarely collapse from one dramatic event. They weaken gradually, often by ignoring peripheral regions until those regions become central battlegrounds. Greenland is exactly that kind of place, quiet, remote, easy to overlook, but strategically priceless. The US understands this now more clearly than ever. That's why it reopened a consulate in Greenland after decades. That's why it increased diplomatic engagement. That's why military cooperation continues to deepen. These are not symbolic moves. They are defensive moves, aimed at preventing a future where America wakes up too late. To understand why the United States is so anxious about Greenland today, we have to look at who else is paying close attention. Because America is not alone in seeing Greenland's value. China and Russia are both moving north, quietly but deliberately, and the Arctic is becoming a new arena of global rivalry. This isn't happening in the future, it's happening right now. Let's start with China. On paper, China has no Arctic territory, yet Beijing officially calls itself a near-Arctic state. That phrase alone tells you a lot. China knows that the Arctic will shape future trade, energy access, and military power, so instead of using force, China uses money, investments, loans, infrastructure projects. This strategy has worked for China across Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe, and Greenland fits perfectly into this model. Over the past decade, Chinese companies have shown serious interest in Greenland's airports, ports, and mining projects. Rare earth minerals are the real prize. China already dominates the global rare earth supply chain, but it also understands the risk of overconcentration. Greenland offers diversification and leverage. If China can secure long-term access to Greenland's resources, it strengthens its position against the United States in trade negotiations, technology competition, and even military production. From Greenland's point of view, these offers can look attractive. China promises investment without lectures, jobs without political conditions, at least on the surface. For a small economy looking for independence, that can be tempting, but from Washington's perspective, this is a red line. Infrastructure is never just infrastructure. Airports can become logistics hubs. Ports can support naval access. Mining projects can create political dependence. The U.S. understands that once China embeds itself economically, strategic influence follows. This is why the United States strongly opposed Chinese involvement in Greenlandic airport construction a few years ago, behind closed doors. Pressure was applied. Denmark stepped in with funding. The message was clear: some investments are too dangerous to allow. That moment revealed something important. Greenland is no longer just a local or regional issue. It's a front line in global competition. Now look at Russia. Unlike China, Russia is an Arctic power by geography. It has the longest Arctic coastline in the world and has been rapidly militarizing the region. New bases, radar systems, airfields, and icebreaker fleets for Russia. The Arctic is both a defensive shield and an economic lifeline. As sanctions limit access to traditional markets, Arctic shipping routes and energy resources become even more critical. Greenland sits uncomfortably close to Russia's Arctic ambitions. From Moscow's perspective, U.S. military presence in Greenland is a constant threat. From Washington's perspective, Russian expansion makes Greenland even more valuable as an observation and defense point. This creates a classic security dilemma. Each side claims it's acting defensively, but both sides keep escalating. What makes this situation especially dangerous is that much of this competition happens quietly. There are no dramatic headlines, no official declarations of conflict, just slow, strategic moves, more investments here, more patrols there, more diplomatic outreach. Over time, these actions reshape the balance of power. And this is where America faces a challenge it hasn't fully solved. The U.S. is very good at reacting to crises, but Greenland is not a crisis yet. It's a long-term contest, one that requires patience, consistency, and economic commitment. If the U.S. underinvests, pulls back, or assumes its influence is guaranteed, it creates space for others to move in. This is why Greenland represents a test of American strategy in the 21st century. Can the U.S. compete without force? Can it offer investment, partnership, and respect for local autonomy while still protecting its core interests? Because pressure alone won't work. Greenland's leaders are watching carefully. They want partners, not masters. Now let's talk about consequences. because until now, Greenland might still feel distant, symbolic, or theoretical. But losing influence over Greenland would come with real costs for the United States. Costs that would be felt in money, security, and global power. Start with national defense. The U.S. military does not place bases randomly. Every major installation exists because geography demands it. Greenland's location makes it one of the most important early warning points on the planet. If the United States were forced to reduce its presence or operate under political uncertainty, its missile detection and space monitoring capabilities would weaken. In a world where hypersonic weapons reduce reaction times from minutes to seconds, even a small blind spot can change the balance of deterrence. This is not about fear. It's about math and physics. Then there's the Arctic itself. As ice continues to melt, the region is becoming more accessible every year. New shipping routes mean faster global trade, but they also mean new choke points. Whoever influences these routes can monitor, regulate, or disrupt global commerce. If the U.S. loses strategic leverage near Greenland, it risks falling behind in a region that will shape 21st century trade flows. Control of sea lanes has always been a foundation of American power. The Arctic threatens to redraw that map. Economically, the implications are just as serious. Rare earth minerals are not optional in modern economies. They are essential, from electric vehicles to fighter jets, advanced electronics to renewable energy. These materials are the backbone of future industries. If Greenland's resources fall under the influence of rival powers, the U.S. becomes more dependent on foreign-controlled supply chains. That dependence creates vulnerability. Prices rise, production slows, strategic autonomy erodes. This is where financial history offers a warning. Great powers often decline not because they lose wars, but because they lose control over critical resources and trade routes. Spain lost silver dominance. Britain lost industrial supremacy. The United States risks losing strategic materials if it underestimates Greenland's importance. Finance historian Time has shown before how economic leverage often matters more than military strength. In the long run, Greenland sits at the intersection of both. There is also a political cost. If the U.S. appears unable or unwilling to maintain influence in Greenland, allies will notice. Credibility matters. If Washington can't protect its interests in a region so close to home, questions will be raised about its commitments elsewhere. Power is as much perception as reality. Greenland may be remote, but its symbolism is not. Now imagine a slow shift. Not a dramatic break. Just more foreign investment from rivals. More local decisions that reduce U.S. flexibility. More diplomatic balancing by Greenlandic leaders. Over time, America's role becomes less central. By the time policymakers realize what's happening, reversing course becomes expensive and politically difficult. This is how influence is lost in the modern world. Quietly, this is why Greenland forces the U.S. to think differently. Traditional power projection is not enough. What's needed is long-term engagement, investment in local communities, respect for autonomy, economic partnerships that benefit Greenland directly, not just American interests. The U.S. cannot afford to be seen as present only when it feels threatened. Influence requires consistency, so where does this all lead? The future of Greenland is still unwritten, but one thing is already clear. Greenland is no longer just a frozen island on the edge of the world. It is becoming a decision-maker in global power politics. Every investment, every diplomatic move, every policy choice made today will shape the balance of power for decades to come. For the United States, this is a moment of truth. The era where geography could be taken for granted is over. Power is once again tied to land, resources, and location. Greenland combines all three. If the U.S. adapts, invests wisely, and builds genuine partnerships, it can secure its position in the Arctic without force or conflict. But if it hesitates, assumes loyalty, or reacts too late, influence will slip away, not in one dramatic moment, but piece by piece. Greenland itself faces a difficult path. Independence is a powerful dream, but independence without economic security can turn into dependence on whoever offers the fastest money. The challenge for Greenland will be choosing partners who offer long-term stability instead of short-term gains. History is full of examples where small regions became battlegrounds for great powers, often paying the highest price. Greenland has a rare chance to shape its own future without war, but only if decisions are made carefully. And this story is bigger than Greenland. It tells us something important about the world we're entering. The next global struggle won't always look like tanks and battles. It will look like infrastructure deals, mining contracts, shipping routes, and quiet diplomacy. It will happen slowly, in places most people don't watch closely. By the time headlines catch up, the outcome may already be decided. That's why understanding stories like this matters. Finance Historian Time exists to connect history, money, and power so we can see patterns before they fully play out. Greenland may seem distant, but its future will affect global trade, technology, energy prices, and security in ways that eventually reach everyone. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think the United States should increase its role in Greenland? Or should Greenland chart a completely independent path even if that means partnering with rivals of the US? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read them. And your perspective helps shape future videos. If you found this breakdown valuable, share this video with someone who cares about geopolitics, history, or the future of global power. And if you haven't already, make sure you're subscribed to Finance Historian Time for more deep, research-driven stories that go beyond headlines. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.